Will Iran retaliate or capitulate? Donald Trump says the US bombing attacks he ordered have totally obliterated Iran's key nuclear sites. And he's threatening more strikes if Tehran doesn't return to diplomacy. But what if it decides not to? And what are the risks of a regional spillover? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. The United States has struck Iranian soil, hitting 3 of the country's nuclear facilities. The US joins Israel in what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims to be an operation to remove Iran's nuclear capabilities. American intelligence has previously stated it believes Tehran doesn't have nuclear weapons nor plans to produce them. The US president is threatening more strikes if peace isn't achieved. But Iran has hit back, striking central and northern Israel. So, is this a major escalation in the conflict between Iran and Israel? Is there a real danger of nuclear fallout? How likely is Iran to strike US bases? And is the Middle East moving closer to a regional war? We'll put these questions to our guests, but first, Imogen Kimber tells us more.
The US bombs 3 nuclear facilities in Iran: Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan, joining Israel in its ongoing bombardment that's also targeted Tehran, oil and gas fields and other nuclear facilities. The American president addressed the nation.
I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Before the attacks, Trump demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. But Tehran's response was to bomb northern and central Israel. It declared the US attacks a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
The American enemy has assumed responsibility for the attacks against the sites, a barbaric move violating international regulations, particularly the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This illegal move was unfortunately carried out amid the indifference, even the complicity, of the IAEA.
The Iranian foreign minister said on X that the US violated the UN Charter and international law, as well as betraying diplomacy by supporting Israel's attacks despite having scheduled nuclear talks with Iran, and has now crossed all red lines, stoking fears Iran may strike US bases in the region.
There is no red line that they have not crossed. And the last one, and the most dangerous one, happened only last night, when they crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities. I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy. We are now calculating the damages.
In the US, some of Trump's own party condemned the strike. Republican Thomas Massie saying it's not constitutional. Democrat Rauf had already called for a measure to force Trump to get congressional approval before deciding on such a move.
I only want one thing.
And many of Trump's MAGA supporters are against the US intervening in the conflict, fearing it may become what they see as another forever war in the Middle East. US intelligence has long maintained Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Trump.
From the beginning of the operation, I promised you that Iran's nuclear facilities would be destroyed one way or another. This promise has been fulfilled.
But some in Iran say the nuclear plants were not destroyed beyond repair, and the technology remains intact. For now, the bombings are continuing, but with a heightened fear of possible radiation leaks from nuclear sites and the risk of a regional war. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests in Tehran. Zohreh Kharazmi is the assistant professor in the Faculty of World Studies at the University of Tehran. In Vienna, Tariq Rauf is the former head of Verification and Security Policy Coordination Office at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And in Istanbul, Matthew Bryza is a former National Security Council official at the White House and a former diplomat. Welcome to the programme. I want to start in Tehran first with Zohreh. The Iranian foreign minister has been very clear. They were negotiating with the US when Israel struck. They were negotiating with the European Union when America struck, that they had never left the negotiation table. But now Donald Trump is saying they need to come back to the negotiations table. Is there any trust left between Iran and the US right now?
You can imagine that during 10 days, 3 times, actually, this was the United States and his allies that used the negotiation as a cloak to actually hide their plots for military actions. And the last night one was a climax with using B-2 bombers and the bunker buster bombs. As they claimed, 30,000-pound bomb was just actually used against Iran. So just put yourself in shoes of Iranians. Then you understand that Iran, as only a party of the JCPOA, that for many actually years were committed to the actually commitments, and it was Trump that trashed it. And now, after actually putting a context, that they're setting a context that Iran was was set in a position to do the negotiations, and the negotiations were used as a cloak to hide military actions plots. So Iran is not in the position to put any actually eggs in the actually basket of the negotiations, and there's no trust. And I think it would be very difficult in future to set a rail of negotiations anymore.
In Istanbul, Matthew, there aren't a huge amount of options for Iran right now, but there seem to be less for America. America's put down a red line. You come back to the negotiating table or we threaten more strikes. But you've heard there's no trust there with the Americans. Is this a failure of diplomacy, a complete failure of diplomacy?
I actually don't think it is. You know, you always have to remember that the use of force and the threat of force is a tool of diplomacy. There's the great 19th century Prussian political military strategist von Clausewitz who said, war is the continuation of politics by other means. So even though Foreign Minister Araghchi now is making the political point that Iran was always at the negotiating table with the Europeans, on Friday, he said, I'm not negotiating with the Europeans. On Friday, he said, I'm listening, but I'm not going to negotiate under duress while Israel is attacking Iran. So I think from Washington's perspective, if these were as successful military strikes as Washington claims, if they really did destroy Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities, that then changes the political environment as well. And I think will provide a strong incentive for Foreign Minister Araghchi not to say he's not negotiating, but actually to negotiate. I think, in other words, Trump lost faith in the negotiating process and decided to use force. But at the end of the day, he wants an agreement because he thinks, as crazy as it may sound, he could get a Nobel Peace Prize if Iran and the United States come to some sort of peace agreement.
Well, let's go to Tariq Rauf now. Tariq, you've been part of the Verification and Security Policy Coordination Office at the International Atomic Energy Agency. You've been very, very involved in all of this. Hitting Fordow, hitting Natanz, hitting those facilities, has it changed the game for Iran?
Well, it seems that at least in the short term, Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities have been severely damaged, if not destroyed. What has happened to the nearly 9,000 kilograms of enriched uranium at 2%, 5%, 20%, and 60%, we do not know. At some point, the IAEA will need to go in and again make material balance to ensure that all the material is there. I saw a report on the Washington Post website that on the 19th of June, a number of trucks were observed at Fordow, and apparently they might have taken away the nearly 200 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that was at Fordow. The remaining 200 plus grams of 60% were at Natanz, so we don't know what the situation is there. So that is an important concern. And then in a broader sense, we also need to be cognizant of the UN Charter, IAEA resolutions. We are living in 2025. This is not the age of Karl von Clausewitz, where war is a continuation of politics by other means. We have had 2 world wars. We have a UN Charter. We have a rules-based international system. We are supposed to resolve our disputes through diplomatic and peaceful means.
Zohreh, the US is expecting you to negotiate at the barrel of a gun effectively by taking this military action. But what are the options now for Iran? If Iran strikes back at US targets, that's an escalation. Is that something that you think is likely to happen?
First of all, both the United States and Israel indicated that they like to do a sort of stunning shock attack, and in its actually interpretation set Iran on its knees. But the fact is that Iran is very well at war of attrition and is very patiently doing so. Today, you see that just hours after United States attack, Iran started to actually damage Tel Aviv very badly through using Khorramshahr missiles. That's an ultrasonic one that has the capability to carry 4,000-pound bomb. So Iran has a lot of tens of thousands of different range of missiles. It has its own allies in the region. It has 19 bases, American bases, with 50,000 troops in a very short distance, much easier to be targeted. And also it has the venue of the world energy at Hormuz Strait. There are lots of actually tools and devices in actually in hands of Iran. And I think that at least just talking about the energy side, for example, JC Morgan is predicting that the Brent oil can be actually skyrocketing to $130 a barrel. So you can imagine that what's running gun in American cities when the fuel is becoming that much expensive. And even the world economy, what sort of disaster it can be. And at the same time, you see the solidarity inside Iran, as the Supreme Leader said, and also Dr. Araghchi talked about these everlasting consequences. This war of attrition is not something to be soon ended by, and Iran has a self-determination inside the nation and also in the government to actually defend its legitimate rights.
But Zohreh, if you use any of the things that you've just talked about, including cutting off the Strait of Hormuz and disabling the world's shipping, that is going to be seen as an act of war by the Americans, and there will be a retaliation that perhaps might lead to violent regime change. Is that something that the government of Iran is thinking about? Is it prepared for that?
You know, this story of regime change is something that's very much fabricated by the Western media. You have seen that when Israelis had that just shock attack on Iran with just assassinating top commanders, scientists, they had a lot of drones actually cultivated already inside Iran, and they were talking a lot in Western media about the civil unrest. But the fact was that what we saw here was an unprecedented unity and solidarity among the people. I was in the Friday prayer this week, and I saw that thousands of people, believe me, that they brought their infants to the old members of the family. All were included. And what were they chanting was death to Israel, death to the United States. And they were just very much demanding the military actually officials to be firm. And as they already crushed Israel, you know, the 1/3 of Tel Aviv badly damaged. Many estimate that $500 billion damage in Israel. You see that the whole story of the regime change is very much Western media fabricated. And at the same time, just consider that the whole story of actually pushing Trump by Netanyahu to enter the war directly was based on this, that Israel was badly pressured. They cannot abide by this war of attrition. They cannot really continue. And Iran knows it well. And also Iran had lots of allies in the region that doesn't need to do it directly or take the responsibility of for example, doing something about the energy infrastructures. And
right.
So there are lots of actually tools and devices, instruments possible to be used.
Matthew, lots of devices, lots of instruments, lots of tools that Iran can use, but are any of those going to be effective against somebody like Donald Trump?
Yeah, you raised exactly the right question. When it comes to closing the Strait of Hormuz, I totally agree with you. Were Iran to do that, there would be a massive U.S. military response, and that wouldn't last very long. But I agree that J.P. Morgan has said, were the straits able to be closed for a prolonged period, oil would skyrocket to 120 or 130 a barrel. But that's not going to happen. My guess is the top leadership of Iran does not want to be in a full-scale war with the United States. It's not going to be a war of attrition. There are going to be no U.S. troops on the ground. It's going to be U.S. airstrikes and Israel doing whatever it does. But rationally, no one in Iran would want that. And Donald Trump, I think, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm apolitical, but I don't think Donald Trump wants a wide-scale war. I think what he wants is what I said before. He wants an actual negotiation where he can become the diplomatic hero at negotiating some sort of peace between Iran and the United States with no nuclear program. I am 100% convinced Trump does not want regime change in Tehran, but I'm also convinced Netanyahu does. That's not propaganda. That's clearly his goal. That's why Israeli airstrikes have been hitting police stations, energy infrastructure in Iran, not to mention individual leaders. And I think we're going to see a big tension now between Trump and Netanyahu, where Trump is likely to tell Netanyahu, enough. I did what you wanted in terms of the nuclear program. I don't want there to be a regional war. Knock it off. And we could see a real period of tension in U.S.-Israeli relations.
Tariq, that's the exact question that I wanted to put to you, in fact. Benjamin Netanyahu is looking for something more than perhaps he's getting from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has taken out, he says, the 3 key nuclear facilities. He's destroyed them. He's taken that effectively off the table. He's almost called Israel's bluff. You get rid of all of this, it means that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, even if they wanted it, and they say that they don't. But that's not going to be enough for Israel, right? That's the wild card.
So I just saw a report attributed to the IRGC that the Straits of Hormuz will be closed in a few hours. So I don't know whether this is correct or not. But for a long time, Mr. Netanyahu has wanted to see a change of regime in Iran. He does not trust them. For many, many years, he has been calling for a regime change. He has also been referring to the protests and chants on the streets of Tehran asking for ending Israel and so on. So for him, I think he would like to see regime change. The Crown Prince, the son of the former Shah, has already issued a statement that he is ready to go back. And he has a 100-day plan to restore Iran at the international level of diplomacy and make it a respected state. So we don't know whether that will happen. And if the current regime is toppled, we're not sure what the result will be. We have seen what happened in Iraq. We've seen what happened in Libya. So nobody can guarantee from the outside if an established regime is displaced, who will take over, what will be the situation, whether there will be a civil war, and so on.
Zohreh, Tariq makes a very good point. The regimes that have fallen due to violent regime change have been because there was a threat of them getting a nuclear weapon. We're talking about Syria, we're talking about Libya, we're talking about Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and now the pressure is on. Now, the regimes that haven't fallen, India, Pakistan, North Korea, have survived because they have nuclear weapons. That's a very dangerous precedent, right? So, is there a scenario where Iran needs to pursue getting a nuclear weapon for national security reasons, simply to survive?
First of all, not IAEA and not any intelligence, including the United States, could pursue any evidence that Iran is seeking for a nuclear weapon. And you know that Supreme Leader's verdict still is just working with just forbidding developing of the nuclear weapons. But the fact is that you are looking at the concept of power from the very Western point of view. I can have an example that indicates that having safety and defending your security and sovereignty and integrity for us, for the resistant nations, for the South, global South, is something absolutely beyond the Western imaginations of the power. Look at Yemen. For 8 months, Saudi Arabia did everything it could. Used all sorts of American artillery, pressured Yemenis very, very badly. Starvation was over there. Then, finally gave up. The resistance worked. And then United States attacked with 1,100 airstrikes. Finally, it didn't work. So you see that even your conception of power, your conception of resistance is absolutely rejected in the present world. You see, look at Gaza. How many, it's actually more than a year. They are badly pressured. The ethnic cleansing was done. Women and children were slaughtered. But what finally happened? No objectives of the war was really addressed by Israelis. So I'd like you to know that the nuclear weapon for us is not an option, has not been actually the option and would not be an option. But being firm about the integrity of the country, being firm about the sovereign rights to reach the peaceful nuclear energy, it is something that Iran is abiding by. And as the Supreme Leader said, I don't think that nor impose war, neither actually impose peace can work here.
Matthew, I'm going to get your response to that in a second, but I want to come to Tariq first. Tariq, that perspective, the idea that Iran doesn't need a nuclear weapon because it has resilience, it has other ways of fighting back, is that something that you think is understood in Western capitals?
I'm not sure. I think we have a new era of neocolonialism, where we have the European states and the United States and some others very much dominating both the economic space as well as the military space. And as you pointed out in one of your comments, North Korea, India, and Pakistan are not threatened with regime change. They are not threatened to give up their nuclear weapons. They have actually been accepted tacitly. And so the message that the world is saying from Iraq, from Libya, and now from Iran is that if you want to stand up, you need to have nuclear weapons. Iran in the short term will not be able to develop nuclear weapons. The IAEA report clearly said there is no structured nuclear weapon acquisition program currently underway. The report of 31 May essentially talked about actions that were taken in Iran in 2003 and thereabouts that were not fully declared. Those also do not add up to a full-fledged nuclear weapon program. So we need more clarity on this issue. We need more negotiations. We need the IAEA as an independent international technical organization to be more active. The IAEA Board of Governors of 35 is badly divided. 19 or 20 are Western and Western supporters. 11 or 12 are Global South, and then you have China and Russia. So we need more unity on this, and we need better interactions to resolve these issues in a peaceful manner. And there was no need for anyone to have attacked Iran's nuclear facilities at this particular time.
Well, let's not forget that Israel also has nuclear weapons. Now, Matthew, I want to bring this point to you as well. You heard Zohreh talk about the resistance of the Iranians, the way they will be able to fight back. They don't need a nuclear weapon because this is an existential threat, to use Benjamin Netanyahu's words when it comes to Israel. This is an existential threat that they see against their country themselves. So, is that understood in Western capitals? Is that something that Donald Trump understands?
I think it does. I think that's why he's made clear regime change is not his goal. Think back a couple of weeks ago when he was saying, all I care about is eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons capability, and then let's negotiate peace. To make Iran great again, which sounded sort of jocular, but he's made clear he has no gripe with the Iranian people or doesn't want regime change. He just, as you said, shares Prime Minister Netanyahu's view that Iran, well, stated policy wants to eliminate the state of Israel, and an Iran that has a nuclear weapons capability has the ability to do that. So nobody in Washington wants a war of attrition or a ground war with Iran. That'll never happen. There are going to be no U.S. troops that are sent to Iran unless this conflict escalates way out of anything that I think any of us sitting here together today can imagine. So that's off the table. Nobody, or at least Washington, Trump doesn't want to pressure the Iranian people, doesn't want to squeeze the regime into failure.
Sorry, Matthew, we are running out of time. We are running out of time now. I just want to come back to Zohreh very quickly. Zohreh, you've heard our guests there. You've heard what they've had to say. But there is a theory that suggests that if you negotiate...
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, if you negotiate with the Americans, then you cut out the Israelis completely and you don't have to worry about them. Is that something that Tehran is taking seriously? Will you negotiate with the Americans?
Before going to your question, I'd like to add a comment to other guests' comments, actually. The idea of IAEA. IAEA is absolutely missing the reputation and actually in Iran. Because all the time what we got was a sort of betrayal by the Western dominant board of governance there, that they're talking about themselves, they're calling themselves as the international community, but the fact is that it's very Western dominant one. And they're using it, I think the United States and its coalition is using it as a sort of dual tool, that whenever they need it, they use it as a sort of side pressure against us. No technical assistance, no protection IAEA brought to Iranians. So even many Iranians ask the government to come out and actually detach itself from the NPT. So I think that the order of the region is changing, and many that global south governments that the colleague talked about is thinking that, okay, what is the benefits and the advantages for us, for actually this global south, to be attached to the structures that are already rugged, corrupt, and Western dominant. What about your question? The region's countries that have located and hosted the United States-based military bases, they already accepted the responsibility of. So if Iran is attacked by the United States, and we know that the artillery is, because the United States is too far, so it's used the land here. So they cannot talk about being non-accountable for such a situation. Iran has never liked to invade or do any actually imposing any sort of actually attack to any of the neighbors. Always they say that the security is something very shared in the region. But if the point actually, the point of escalation goes up in a way by Americans, that there is no way, I think that these small countries like, for example, United Arab Emirates, Qatar should swiftly disappear. They're like a sort of dot on a map. And you know that Iran is a very huge country with lots of sources and allies in the region.
We are out of time. So
steps to
unfortunately, sorry, we're out of time, and I want to thank all our guests, including you, Zohreh Kharazmi, Tariq, Rauf, and Matthew Bryza. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, IRGC.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you could also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.